When people come to my studio or see my work in person, one of the first things they often comment on are the collection of portraits I have featuring women of color. When I first started painting these portraits, I didn't know exactly why I was making them, but lately I've been reflecting on that more and more. Right now, there are protests and riots where I live, and of course, across the country. So many people are hurting, and it's made me think about what I could be doing. So I know it's small, but I wanted to make this video, and I want to talk about these pieces and why, in my experience, it is so meaningful to celebrate Black lives and Black faces in fine art. I've grown up with a lot of privilege that lets me have a career as an artist. I had the time and the energy, and my family had the means to let me pursue this interest. Not to mention that I grew up in a culture that had a great deal of access to fine art and where it's a normal thing to have in your homes or to want to collect. But looking at the work itself, there are these questions that keep coming up and that I've been mulling over for a while. The first of these questions is why I don't paint nudes. This one isn't cut and dry because I have some nudes in my home and they're some of my favorite pieces of art. Studying anatomy is, I think, a critical part of an art education for anyone interested in painting people or animals, and the naked figure is the most nuanced way to complete that course of study. But there's this one thing that's just stuck with me. This question of, when does our study drift into the territory of objectification? And not even sexual objectification, but just treating our model the same way we would an object, like a still life or a landscape. When we start to edit their bodies, not to better represent them as people, but because it has a better look. For me, that distinction is clearest between portraits and figurative nude. There are absolutely ways to paint a nude without objectifying your subject, but I gravitate toward portraits because they are inherently so much more about who we are. Our personalities are so clearly expressed through our faces that paintings of faces, to me, are much more likely to be about who someone is and not what they look like. My portraits aren't about how my subject looks at me, the painter, or you, the viewer, but instead about who that person is and how we can translate the beauty of their humanity onto a two-dimensional surface. I know this is a pretty abstract question despite the example I just gave, so let me share something that is a bit more concrete. In workshops, I get to know a lot of women painters of all levels. And when it comes to painting figures, there's this one phrase I hear creep into the conversation pretty regularly. And it's some variation of, women are just more beautiful to paint. I think as women artists, we like to think that because we ourselves don't want to be objectified, that it means that we are somehow immune to objectifying women or other people generally. But the truth is that it's far more likely that we've been influenced by centuries of male artists painting naked women in a very specific way than it is that women are just objectively more attractive or more worthy of being painted. And tied into this pretty intensely is whiteness. For pretty much all of the paintings I can picture in my head throughout art history of female nudes, the standard of beauty isn't just white. It is glowing white, porcelain white, like maybe you just saw a ghost white. And this isn't a coincidence. Earlier this year, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston shared a story with the New York Times of John Singer Sargent's secret muse, a Black man named Thomas McKellar. McKellar posed for Sargent for nearly a decade in public pieces depicting everything from men to women, gods to goddesses. Here's what New York Times columnist Alina Tugend had to say. But the countenance of McKellar, who was African American, is everywhere in Boston, in the work of one of the most prominent painters of the Gilded Age, John Singer Sargent. McKellar appears as classical gods and goddesses in a mural in the rotunda of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, as a World War I soldier in a stairwell of Harvard University's Widener Library, and as the body in a portrait of A. Lawrence Lowell, an early 20th century Harvard president. But McKellar never appears as a black man. Rather, in all of these significant works, his body becomes that of a white man, a god, even a Native American leader. And that matters. When I first started bringing my paintings to art shows, I brought these pieces with me. Here in North Carolina, art shows in the summer are hot. The humidity is so thick that it sticks to you, and unless you are blessed with the rare temperate day, people just want to buy their craft beer and make their rounds before getting back in the air conditioning. Most people walk by without even looking into a booth. But occasionally, a little girl would stop, tug at her parents' hands, and she would point to any of these pictures that you're seeing in this video. According to parent after parent, it would be the only painting she would see that celebrated a woman who looks like her. How much do we take that for granted, being able to see ourselves and people who look like us in fine art, in classical portraiture, in the kinds of paintings we would love to have in our homes? I think a lot about the privilege that I have and what it means to be a white woman living in America, and what responsibility do I have to see that privilege and use it to help give others the dignity and opportunities that I have had. I wish there were a simple answer that promised a big impact, but maybe it is a matter of starting with something small like this video. If you know of any Black-owned businesses or artists of color that we should support, or if you have ideas as to how I could reach out to children and communities of color to offer the same kind of art education that I had as a child, please let me know any of your ideas in the comments. I also want to do my part to help local nonprofits who are fighting for racial justice. For any fine art print, ready-to-hang print, or original artwork sale in the month of June of the pieces you've seen in this video, I'll be donating a portion of proceeds to the North Carolina Community Bail Fund of Durham. A link to both my Etsy shop and my website if you'd like to take home one of these pieces of art, and in doing so help this critical cause. For more information on this nonprofit, I will put a link to their website in the description, as well as links to other organizations that could use your support. If you'd like to help me make more paintings like these to inspire more little girls of color to see themselves in fine art, I would love to have you over on Patreon. A link to that in the description, and I will also link to Alina Tugend's New York Times article in case you would like to read that as well. Until my next video, I hope you and your loved ones stay healthy and stay safe. Happy painting, everyone.